Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our Board of Adjustment meeting. Today is Wednesday, August 15th, and it is 6:45. Okay, and we're officially starting, and I apologize for the lateness. Uh, 6:40? That time is off? 6:41, you're right. Okay, so regardless, I apologize because we should have got started at 6:30, but we're on a roll. With that said, would you please rise? And Ms. Estime Irvin, would you lead us in the pledge?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And may we have a roll call, please?
Good evening. Ms. Chair, roll call. Rosalind Philippi,
Philippe,
forgive me.
here.
Holly Cohen, Michael D.
McDear
Maid,
McDermott.
Present.
Cassandra Arnold, Dana. How you pronounce your last name
I
now?
knew it. I'm,
Been long.
I'm waiting for you. Dana Magloire Fenelon, present.
Thank you. Laura Hill,
Present.
Mary Estima Irvin,
Mary Estime Irvin, present.
You'll get it. Don't worry.
thank you for your kindness. Thank you.
Ah,
We have
All right.
quorum, Ms. Chair.
thank you. And with that being said, could you please go through for the audience, the announcement?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay.
So the agenda includes quasi-judicial items which may be either approved, denied, or approved with conditions. For the public hearings, please be advised that the following items on the agenda are quasi-judicial in nature. The applicant or duly authorized agent for the applicant must be present. If no representative is present, the application will be tabled to the next Board of Adjustment meeting when the petition, period. When the petition is announced, the applicant or his or her agent shall approach the microphone and state his or her name and address for the record. Any interested party wishing to speak on any item may approach the podium after the board has opened the public hearing. Each party shall approach the microphone and state his or her name and address for the record, and shall address his or her comments to the board. Each party shall speak for not more than 3 minutes in order to provide for order and time for other interested parties to address their concerns and comments to the board. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, anyone who will be speaking about any of the items, whether for or against, please rise so we can issue the oath.
Applicants, would you please rise? Anybody who's going to speak on this topic?
Yes, anybody who's going to speak to the board, please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in these proceedings?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Any amendments to the agenda?
No, ma'am, but may I introduce your staff change?
Sure.
As you all know, I have been moved to the city planner position, in case you did not know.
We did, no.
So, we have hired a new zoning manager. He's acting tonight as your board secretary. He will become your board liaison. His name is Derek Cook. Derek, would you take a moment and give a little brief bio of yourself?
Good evening. As Ms. Love has stated, I am Derek Cook. Prior to my employment here, I worked with the city of Miami for 11 years. Prior to that, the city of Delray, and prior to that, my home state, which you may detect with my accent, North Carolina. I worked as a planner
No.
as well. Prior to that, my schooling, I went to North Carolina State University, University of North Carolina, and I have my a master's.
So,
Well, welcome.
you will certainly enjoy working with Mr. Cook. I know I do. And I have enjoyed my brief time with you all. I'm sure that Derek will just jump right in there. But tonight, he is your board secretary, so I appreciate your understanding about the name pronunciation. He will get better at that. But in the meantime, we're ready to proceed when you are, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. With that being said, may I have approval of the minutes from May 16? I know it's been a long time.
Second?
Okay, moved by Mr. McDermott, seconded by Ms. Hill. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Communications, do we have any board communications?
So these are communications that you might have had with applicants or their representatives or members of the public who wanted to discuss any of the applications that are on the agenda tonight.
No, none to disclose.
And they couldn't get me. I was out of the country. Okay, all right. Any continued petitions? I see none. Okay, let's start with the new one. V-03-18, that's RD Dealership and Service Center, 1995 Northeast 142nd Street. Is,
Ready? This is a variance to Article 5, Division 15, Section 5-1512 of Chapter 29 of the City of North Miami Code of Ordinances, Land Development Regulations, to allow a detached sign off-site instead of on-site as required in the LDRs for detached signage. The second variance for this property is a variance to Article 5, Division 15, Section 5-1505B of Chapter 29 of the City of North Miami Code of Ordinances, Land Development Regulations, to allow a monument sign to have a height of 32.8 feet where only 20 feet is permitted in a non-residential district. So if I may begin with this particular project, this is the Audi dealership located on 142nd Street. And they have, if you can look at the following page in your staff report, if you'd follow along in your staff report, I'll show you some pictures. I'd like to point out some information for you. On page 3 of the staff report for this particular item, you'll see the location. They have they're requesting a variance approval for this particular site. You'll also see that the sign location is proffered in a photograph here. You'll see the FEC corridor between the Biscayne and their location. The site has had several variances already at this location. It is surrounded primarily by industrial and mixed-use development. There is, so they don't have an issue with residential around nearby. Let's just take a quick overview on page 4 of this particular variance. There are 2 of them. As you heard when I read to you, one is for the off-site variance. That's variance 1, to have an off-site monument sign. The second variance is to the height. On the height request, the maximum the Board of Adjustment can approve is 25% increase over the current 20-foot limitation for a monument sign. For the off-site component of this variance, it's a freestanding monument signs are to be on-site. However, you as a board can grant a variance because what it requires is that they have a 5-foot setback from the property line. This, by allowing it to be off-site, it's like a negative setback of about 125 feet in order for them to be able to have visibility as they're traveling to the traveling public. The second one is for the height. Again, that's a 32.8-foot monument sign. And you can see in your packet that the applicant has provided some view studies so that you could see the difference between how they would see a 20-foot or 25-foot monument sign versus the 32.8-foot monument sign for the traveling public. Again, we have standards that we have to look at, as you all know, when you do a variance. Section 3-606 of the LDRs have certain criteria. They have to meet at least 4 of the 6 criteria. Looking at the very first one, we believe staff has reviewed this and determined that they do meet that, they do have some special circumstances and conditions that are very particular to the site, particularly on the clear visibility. And again, if you will take a look at, you can actually see, going back to page 3, that there are buildings as they're traveling along. You see the buildings and you see the trees. So they do have an issue with site visibility. So we do believe it meets that criteria for that. The second one is unusual conditions that are not necessarily unique to the property. Well, the Lexus dealership, just a little south of them, also has a monument sign for the same reason. It's a site issue. The next one, we do believe it meets it because it does meet the basic intent of the LDRs to provide for a new state-of-the-art sign. It's going to be attractive, so it shouldn't have a negative effect. It's not going to be a very ugly, and I think if you all looked at your, as you looked into your book, you actually saw the sign as they are proposing it. The next one, we believe, staff believes that it does meet that criteria, because the literal interpretation of this would not allow them to have the same as everyone else does, because everyone else along Biscayne, they don't have that separation distance. Their signage is right there next to it, they can easily see it. The next one, we don't believe that meets that particular criteria because the Audi dealership is already in existence. The last one is that we believe that it does meet the general standards for the LDRs, that it's going to have graphics so as not to distract or disturb the travelers, and it will be set back 20 feet from Biscayne. I don't know if you all have traveled in Fort Lauderdale lately, but there's a sign along I-95 that's this glaring, horrible sign that really affects you at night. The way that this is designed, it is designed not to do that. So, then taking a look at the analysis for the second variance, which is for the height. As I said, it's really, the first one says the same thing, special conditions to that site, and as I noted earlier, the topography of the land does interfere with being able to actually see a sign from that property as you're traveling along Biscayne. FEC, the FEC topography actually comes up higher, so that does affect them, along with, in addition to those buildings and trees. Again, it's not unique. Lexus has the same problem. However, when we went out and measured the Lexus sign, it's only 7 feet tall. But again, they don't have the buildings and the trees that also interfere with the site issue. The next one is that we do not believe it meets that criteria as far as the affecting the stability and appearance of the neighborhood, because again, the maximum height is 25 feet. This would become the highest, the highest sign in the city. So we don't believe that it meets that criteria. The next one is we do believe it meets that criteria because again, most of the businesses front along that corridor and have better sign access and visibility. The next to the last one, we don't believe it meets it because again, they're in existence. It really doesn't keep them from doing anything. However, with the off-site sign variance, it will help them if you all approve that off-site sign variance. We don't believe it meets the last one either, so, because again, the sign is higher than anything else in the neighborhood. So, in conclusion, staff recommends approval of the off-site sign. Staff doesn't recommend approval for the second variance only because you can only approve up to 25%. However, I do want to let you know, as the city attorney has reminded me to make sure I tell you, you all can vote for something different. You don't have to say complete denial. You can say you're the maximum 25 feet, so you can vote for that. And with that, the applicant is here to make a presentation, and whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Ms. Love.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Neil Sander. I'm with Independence Engineering. I'm representing Group 1 Automotive tonight. First of all, I want to thank...
Address? I'm
18 Orchard Avenue, Bordentown, New Jersey. First of all, I want to thank Ms. Love for her very thorough review of the application. And thank you for inviting us to make our application to you. I don't really have anything to say about the first variance. I think it's stated pretty effectively in the staff analysis report. I wanted to make the case for the 32-foot height on the monument sign. What this comes down to is it's fundamentally a safety issue. We recognize that there is a limitation on how much of a variance can be granted for this. However, the two buildings that are blocking the visibility of the sign location are both outside the city of North Miami. They're in North Miami Beach. They're both non-conforming with respect to front yard setback, which exacerbates the problem of visibility of the sign location. As you see, we prepared some sightline exhibits to show at what point you would reasonably be able to see a 25-foot sign or a 32-foot sign in that location. It's not really until you come around the corner of the canopy of the Auto Museum that you can see a 25-foot sign. At that point, you have a 2.5-second visibility window before you're past it. Accounting for speed on the road and the amount of distance, that's actually, by the time you recognize there's an Audi sign there is less than the recommended braking distance to the intersection to be able to stop at that intersection. We wanted to get that additional 7 feet so that you could see it at least enough in advance that you have a safe stopping distance before you have to make the turn to get to the dealership. And if there's any way that we can, circumvent that section of the ordinance to allow that to happen, I mean, if it comes to it, 25-foot sign is safer than a 20-foot sign, which is safer than no sign. But we believe the optimum solution here is a 32-foot sign.
Thank you. All right, with that said, we will open public hearing. Anyone who would like to speak, whether it's for or against, you can come to the podium. Okay. Public, ma'am? Please state your name and address.
So we have a mistake. You're talking about the funeral home?
No.
No,
Mm,
right?
no.
No, it's not that one.
Okay. All right, with that being said, we'll close public hearing. Board discussion.
Question, Chair.
Mr. McDermott?
Who owns that property?
The property that the sign is on,
Uh-huh.
that would be the railroad.
The file should contain reference that this is a lease of FEC property in order to put the sign off-site.
Normally is there a copy of the
There is.
agreement?
It's in your agreement,
It's
sir.
a previous,
I mean, in your book.
It's right, it's in last month.
last
Did
month,
you bring
yeah.
Oh,
last?
There
last
was a lot
month.
of things,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Yeah, because
Oh, last
Derek
month.
Madam
has a
Chair?
copy of it.
May I ask a couple
Sure.
of questions?
Yeah.
So, there obviously is a concern in by me as attorney to the board as to your authority to grant a variance in excess of 25% over what is the maximum height permitted. So that would mean you could not grant a variance in excess of 25 feet in height. Doing more than that violates the city code. You don't have
We
authority
understand.
to do that. So the question I have for the applicant is the location of the sign was picked by you. And if the board only has authority to grant a 25 feet high sign, and that presents a visibility problem, I mean, one solution for you is to move the location of the sign. There's a large open area there, and you could move it further south to improve visibility.
Unfortunately, I'm not familiar enough with the terms of the lease to find out whether that was an option. As far as I know, the railroad could have come to the applicant and said, this is where your sign's going. I really can't speak to that.
But you don't know.
I don't know.
It actually has very specific location.
Right, but
Of the lease
we-
premises.
we don't
Yes.
have evidence as to why that particular location was
Right.
picked.
Correct. And I suspect, Madam Chair, that it is, if you look at its location, it's directly across from Audi versus coming a little further south. And if you'll see the Lexus sign is actually a little bit further south, not directly across from that location. So, that's definitely a possibility perhaps that the applicant can consider. That would help that visibility, and that's an excellent point.
So
Moving it slightly.
then the question is, do you grant the variances and let them consider whether to relocate, or do you continue the matter to have them consider relocating and then come back? That's,
Or you
Seems
can
like-
grant to the point that we can, which is 25,
Yes.
and then it's up to them.
And this is the matter that they've brought to the Board of Adjustment, not potential alternate location for the sign.
they, as
They
far
did
as,
not.
you're
There
right,
is
they,
no alternate location, so
they
this is
presented
what
a
they're asking
particular
us
location.
for,
yes.
so.
And one condition that you could have is that it still meets the same 20-foot setback as proposed. Certainly, you could put that condition on that approval, even if they wherever they end up relocating.
But
Right.
if they decide to relocate the sign to a different location, then they will need to go through this process again, correct?
No, because what you're doing is you're granting an off-site sign, and they have this FEC corridor that they're going to utilize. We're just saying that it's going to be off of their site.
Right, which is
Right,
variance
but-
And
one.
25.
But
It's
20 feet.
20
So that's
feet, yes.
variance one.
Yes, variance
And then
one.
variance two
Is
is
the
the
height,
height, which we
correct.
all understand we can only grant up to
Correct.
25 feet.
But we're gonna deal one at a time.
Right.
Right.
So I have a question. If they grant the variances and they want to pursue a different location, they have to file a whole new application.
Correct.
That's
But
what I was
if they
getting at.
continue it, they could amend the application and identify a new location.
But if it is within the FEC corridor,
Mm-hmm.
within that general location, you could make it where staff would just simply review that off-site location to determine that it still meets the essential 20-foot setback.
Let me ask a question, technical question. Variance one that we're voting on, is that to allow the off-site sign location or to allow the off-site sign location in that specific spot?
That's a good question.
It's a good question.
So,
Jennifer?
I think the way it's written is to
To
allow an
allow
off-site.
off-site.
So it doesn't
Sign.
But-
specify an exact location.
Exact.
So
Right.
if we approve it, they don't necessarily need further approval if they decide to move it because they've still been granted that spot.
Correct.
Well,
Within
But
that,
with the
general
caveat
area.
that you're approving it with the information provided, which is that it would be at this location. So that's why there's the talk about resubmitting the application, is that the information that you're basing your approval on is this FEC lease with a site-specific location. So even though, yes, you are granting a variance from the code requiring it to be on-site and allowing it to be off-site, one thing you need to be considering is that your approval is based off of something, and if that
So we
changes, whether to bring it back.
could approve it, just talking this out, we could approve it, with the caveat that if it changes, they need to present a new lease to,
Well,
to
well, they would
show that
anyway.
they had
The question in my mind is whether you could approve it and then
they
have
can
the
move it.
location modified. For example, the phrase I used to use,
Administrative.
subject to the review and approval of staff, or DRC review, whichever.
Does it end up at some point, they wouldn't end up at
So
DRC?
we can
No,
simply approve
okay.
it.
Are you-
We're just approving the off-site
Correct. That's
Jennifer, are you
variance
okay
one.
with
of
that?
the proposal.
I'm coming in with a new
At
location.
some point, and we can make a caveat that
Does
if the actual location changes, that
Okay.
they will have to come before
Okay.
review of the
Staff.
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 Do we do a limit on the amount
Okay.
of
Yeah, area.
distance that they could move it?
Yeah, I would recommend there to be, it to be in a general area, and if you want to specify by feet
Yeah.
of where you want to keep the signage, the city's okay with that.
They haven't expressed any desire to change the location of the sign, though. That's us
Well,
coming in and
They,
giving them that
That's
option
them.
that they're not asking for.
they also didn't know that they were only gonna get 25 feet.
Right. And if you look at the map, you go right by that sign at 25 feet before you even realize what it was.
At that, at that specific.
At that specific spot, yeah.
But
I
if
suggest
they
we ask
move it
the
a-
applicant whether a general approval
Yeah.
with a limitation works. I was gonna throw out like 25 feet and see where discussion goes on that, like within 25 feet of the least specified location.
May I make a point before
Sure.
I answer your question? I believe the sign easement location is actually mislocated in the review packet.
Ah.
It aligns with the southern right-of-way line of 142nd Street, not the northern right-of-way line.
Oh,
So it already is approximately 40 feet south of where it's shown on that application. At least
It
that's,
was 40 feet south of
Really?
where we are?
that's where the description is,
who prepared the
The
exhibit?
applicant.
yes. Mea culpa.
Well, allowing some flexibility is still
Yes.
something that might be worthwhile.
So,
In, I'm sorry.
oh, I'm sorry, Madam
I
Chair.
was gonna say, with your presentation, I was trying to peek out there. Did you have like, pictures of where actually, rather than what was written?
Yes.
Okay, maybe we can get a better understanding.
Wait, hold on. Is there
I
a
should see
traveling
had a
mic
mic.
or?
Yeah.
Portable, Dunia?
Take this with me.
Is there, oh.
Oh, yeah. That's
Somebody do it.
very good.
Innovative.
Just grab the mic.
Now, what you'll see here is this is the actual lease area description, and it aligns with the southern edge of the right-of-way line instead of the northern edge as was shown on the application.
That is,
It looks a lot better.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And the line of sight exhibits are based on this location. So, you know, it actually does locate behind the canopy and the shed as you're coming south on Biscayne Boulevard.
And 25 feet works at that location?
Uh,
Question mark?
These-
I think.
The
Has to
25,
be.
the 25-foot exhibits are shown with the sign at that location. So you
At
can
that
see that
location.
the symbol is still behind the buildings.
Okay.
Um,
So it's still not
Right.
helping you with that relocation, is what you're saying?
Right, now, I don't know how difficult it would be to renegotiate that location with the Florida Railroad. I do know that they definitely want to get working on the sign. If there is some sort of, you know, range, say, you know, you'd approve the 25-foot sign, and, you know, there would be, you know, as long as the location is within 50 feet or 100 feet of where the current lease location is. For all I know, they may just decide to keep it where it is.
So I think staff should make a recommendation on the distance being the only one
wiggle
here
room.
that can provide competent substantial evidence.
Well, what is staff opinion on 50 feet or 100 feet? Staff?
Just one moment, sir.
What's the right-of-way width?
This is usually 100 foot. It's 50 is different, yeah. This is, yeah, so you're looking at a potential to actually go back, then you get closer to the Lexus sign.
I think that is the Lexus in there.
Okay.
You know what,
That's I
no.
thought. So even at 50, that's not bad, at 50.
Yeah, definitely helps.
Okay, the staff would recommend 50 feet?
50 feet,
Yes, sir.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
Can we make a motion to approve the first item, V-0318, with the caveat, oh, I'm sorry, yeah, with the caveat that it can be relocated within 50 feet of its current location.
Second.
Of the location as defined in the lease.
As
defined.
defined in the lease.
Okay. Okay, moved by Mr. McDermott and seconded by Ms. Estimate Irvin.
And that's for both variances.
No, this is
No, we're
for
doing one at a
variance
time.
one.
Yeah, one at a time.
Okay.
Variance one, a
Okay.
25-foot
Variance one.
sign with a 50 feet range of movement based on the lease terms.
50-50, right?
Yes.
50 feet
50,
from the
within
Yes.
50.
designated location in the lease.
Okay, all right. Roll call, please. Take a, that's you.
That's you.
My apologies, I'm looking at right notes. Roll call. Ms. Chair?
Yes. Ms. Hill?
Ms. Hill?
Yes.
Mr.
McDermott.
May?
Yes?
Ms. Estimate? Irving,
Got it. Yes.
and Ms. McGrory,
Maglore Fenelon.
McLaughlin,
Maglore Fenelon,
Fenelon.
yes. Yes.
Go with Fenelon.
Fenelon, yes.
Whichever.
Okay,
Miss,
so,
That was
it was,
variance two.
based on, it was moved anonymously for the variance number 1.
No, that was variance two was the size of the sign.
right,
That's correct.
Right, the height.
now, there's more discussion?
I think we just voted on both variances because we approved the sign's location, which is off-site, and also the site of the size of the,
No.
No, you have to
No,
take a
it wasn't
separate
mentioned.
vote.
Okay.
It wasn't mentioned, so
So
now
I'll-
we have to do
Okay.
So we'll move
variance 2.
We'll move the second item, V-04-18, to allow for a height extension on the sign to 25 feet.
I second.
Okay, seconded by Ms. Hill. Roll call?
Mr. McDermott,
Yes.
Ms. Hill,
Yes.
Ms. Phillip,
Yes.
Ms. Estelle Irving,
Yes.
Ms. Fenelon,
Yes.
Hi, he's smart.
Taking what?
motion passes unanimously.
Okay, so,
Thank you very much.
good luck.
Thank
And
you.
we hope everything works out. All right. Our next case.
Yes, ma'am.
It's
This,
V-04-18, special exception for funeral home, location 13455 West Dixie Highway. Go ahead, Ms. Love.
it's a special exception use pursuant to Article 4, Division 2, Section 4-202 of the Land Development Regulations, LDRs, to allow a proposed funeral home at the property located at 13455 West Dixie Highway in the C1 district. Said special exception to be reviewed under the criteria set forth in Article 3, Division 5, Section 3-504 of the LDRs. This particular project, and I'll get to the staff report, is to, it's a,
Old dry cleaners.
sorry, it's actually an old gas station. It's a service station building.
Dry cleaner was the
Mm.
last one.
Well, the property appraiser showed it as service station.
It's been cleaner.
It's
run
been a
for-
dry cleaner for the longest. But Go ahead.
That's so strange. My apologies. It was built in 1961, and the applicant is, based on their letter of intent, they're gonna go in and remodel it and have a funeral home that's open 7 days a week from 8 to 6. Gonna start out with 4 employees. We reviewed this under the criteria for a special exception. Around it is primarily C1, commercial property. However, to the southeast is a residential district, single-family homes. And if you'll look on page 3 of your staff report, you can actually see the aerial location of the proposed property. And Section 3504 has those criteria for special exception, and we'll go over that in the analysis. The first is the use of listed special exception in the land use district. It certainly is. It's allowed as in C1. Is there appropriate provision for access for the estimated traffic, the public streets and sidewalks, to assure that there is public safety and to avoid traffic congestion? They do have full frontal access, so the existing spacing is for two-way circulation on the site. Our staff report, they submitted a traffic analysis, and our consultant reviewed that traffic analysis, and based upon that analysis, it's going to have a de minimis impact on the roadway systems. Are there adequate off-street truck loading spaces and parking spaces for the occupants, employees, patrons, and layout of the parking is convenient and conducive to safe operation? The property currently has 13 parking spaces, and based upon our code, it actually exceeds our code requirement by 6 spaces. So our code requires 6 spaces, so they're in excess of 7 parking spaces above what our code said. However, staff was very concerned about what happens during a funeral or a wake as to, where the parking is going to go, because that's certainly not going to be adequate to handle that traffic. So we worked with the applicant. They have obtained an agreement, a parking agreement, so that the overflow parking will not be on the street, cannot do that. And so we're requiring them to have signage where the parking would go, particularly during the times of high impact, and also to have parking attendants to make sure they're directing the traffic, so they're not parking on the street, they're not parking on the swell. That was very important to staff, to make sure they're not impacting the single-family neighborhood that is to the south.
Where's
of
the
them.
cross-parking agreement?
It's actually at Audio Vision Recording Studios.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. And they have agreed that and it's right there next to them, so they've agreed that they will make sure that that is a condition that we would ultimately request that be allowed, providing you allow this special exception to go forward. You'll see that the parking areas, one of the couple of things that we are requiring, and we'll talk a little bit more about conditions that for the parking lot itself. One of the conditions, as you'll see on page 4 of the report, is whether or not there's landscaping and there's buffering between the residential neighborhoods. Well, because they are separated by a road, our code doesn't require that they have fencing or landscaping, because they're already buffered by a roadway. Do they need to have services extended to them? Well, no, everything is already at that location. And again, as I said, our traffic consultant has said that this would be a de minimis impact on the roadway system, because you can't actually calculate when a funeral is going to occur. So there's standards in the ITE generation manual for how they do these things. So is it an appropriate use for that area? It is an allowable use in the LDRs. It is in C1. It's through a special exception process, so that was important to us as staff to make sure that it met that criteria. There's no open code violations or code enforcement fines. Yes, there is one code violation for not obtaining a building permit for interior remodeling. It was opened, but it can't be approved until this is finalized. So, as we noted before, it's an allowable use. We do have some recommended, and Mr. Secretary is going to have some handouts for you. And one of them, actually, if I may have a copy of that. In addition to the approval from our traffic consultant regarding the de minimis impact and the fact that it does meet the criteria for parking on the normal, there's also some additional comments that Mr. Cook is going to hand to you. Oh, you already did? In front of you? Fantastic. Primarily, these are things that we need to see happen at the development review committee stage, because this project will go before staff development review. But we believe it's important that this become part of the record for this special exception, providing you approve it, because it talks about things like the parking spaces need to be realigned, reconfigured. We need to know where the hearses are going to be parked, because it could interfere with circulation. We're trying not to get into that granular level of detail. That's usually at the site plan review level, but we wanted to make sure that these things get read into the record. So with your permission, Madam Chair, I'll read them into the record. The site plan does not include details such as curb cuts. The parallel parking space along Northeast 10th Street, space number 14, is effectively inaccessible.
And that's 10th Avenue.
10th Avenue.
Yeah.
That's, just read it right from the report, so my apologies, thank you. The handicap space shown on the current site plan is not located and designed to facilitate safe entry and exit. Movements in and out of the space should be intuitive, predictable, and consistent with driveway pavement markings. Please indicate where hearses will be parked. The driveways appear to be excessively wide, which may limit opportunities to use site area more efficiently with respect to parking and circulation. Per section 5-1408, a two-way drive aisle that is 20 feet in width is adequate. Closing one of the three driveways might provide an opportunity to use site area more efficiently with respect to parking and circulation. Multimodal site features should be provided and designed per section 5-802. And once again, these will be at that level of granular detail that the Development Review Committee would make sure that are implemented within the site plan.
Can you define multi-model site features for me?
Sure, in section 5-802, there's a number of options for them to pick from. Some of them are things such as bike racks. If you'll bear with me one moment, let me get over there. Although I can't see them installing bike racks at a funeral home. So I use that as an example because that's one of those that we would not require them to do.
So basically, it's a variety of different types of parking?
It is a different types of, not just parking, it's actually things related to how the building looks. It is, they could do some additional, say, for example, if their employees, they had bus passes for their employees, there's an option to encourage them to do more multimodal type activities within their program itself.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, alrighty. So with that is the end of my presentation. However, the applicant is here and would like to make a presentation.
Yes, good evening. My name is Joseph IPA. I'm here for Reflection Funeral Home at 13455 West Dixie Highway.
Anything else you'd like to add? No?
Nothing to add. That's what I'm here for. So I have a funeral home there because my main reason that I want to help the low-income people. That's what I try to put a funeral home there.
Thank you. Then we'll open public hearing. All right. Anyone who would like to speak on this item, whether for or against, you can start lining up. There's a podium right there. Please state name and address, please.
We are from the board from Dixie Terrace Condominium. We are location in 13455 Northeastern Avenue. We represent to 36 units for that condominium. We don't agree with the funeral home because the parking space is too small. So they will be parking in our place. They leave the place dirty and maybe the lot of noise when the people be around in the funeral home. So the main problem is the parking. It's only 13 space. It's not enough for funeral home. So I'm very sure they want to use our place to parking. So that's the main thing. We don't want a funeral home there.
And you represent the condominium. Is that orangey building that's right across?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and you do have a fence, gate and a fence
Yes, ma'am.
into your, okay.
Yes,
thank
but
you.
the funeral home is next to us. We have it across the street, so I'm very sure 100% these people, they want is parking in our place. So that's the point, we don't agree with that.
Okay, thank you.
Plus, the sanitation too, health and sanitation. That's it. You want
Okay.
When they burn the bodies, we're
Okay, name and address.
Yeah, my name is Oscar Ramirez. I'm part of the board member.
What's the
And it's
address?
the same address. And practically, I'm gonna say the same thing that we all might agree because they're gonna use our parking for sure, When people die, some people got a lot of friends. 30 or 40 cars can come there and they don't have parking enough,
Okay.
And we have 36 units, a lot of people there.
All right,
So that's it.
Thank you.
thank you.
Let me add one thing.
Now, we have to get to the next person. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for the time. My name is Jessica Machado. I live at 13355 Northeast 10th Avenue. And I am also in disagreement with allowing the funeral home there. I live right by the condominium, and they don't have enough parking spaces underneath their condominium to allow all their parking. So some of their members actually park on the street, and some of them have been using the funeral home parking, which is gonna push them back onto the street. So, in addition, Audio Vision maybe has spaces for 15 cars. 28 spaces during a big funeral is going to push people onto the swales. More than that, speaking as to the community service, I agree that funeral homes occupy a vital place in our communities, but there are 10 within 3.5 miles of my home. There's one within blocks across the street on West Dixie Highway. There are 6, 7 within 2 miles, 4 just to the north of 135th. We have 10 funeral homes already present in the 3.5 mile radius within my home. Okay, our community is very well served with funeral homes. Okay, we even have a burial plot, Caballero, the plot just a few miles north, just about 3 miles north. Okay, in addition, what drew me to North Miami 2 years ago when I decided to move here was that as a working artist, it's really hard to find a space to work and live in Miami-Dade County. And what drew me was the Arts District, and that's why I choose my home. And we're going in the right direction here. We have a comic book store, we have a yoga studio, we have a new tailor, we have a new bakery, we have Mocha coming up, we have Audio Vision. What drew me to this specific area was that it was branded the Arts District, the Arts and Design District.
Okay.
Think about this, just one, and I'll end on this.
Yes, time is up.
Thank you, I appreciate it. 135th and West Dixie Highway is the northern access point to what North Miami designated as the Arts and Design District. Do we want the gateway to be a funeral home? Or do we want it to be open to people who are coming already north from Wynwood, Little Haiti, and Design District who are looking for a new home and a new place to be? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. One moment. I believe she came in after the oath. If we could just make sure that she's put under oath.
Okay. Did everybody take the oath? You're gonna speak?
Some folks came in after.
Okay.
Okay, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, my name is Mary Tangway. I live at 13295 West Dixie Highway. And my thought about this here, having another funeral home on West Dixie Highway, I already have one right across the street from my shop. And sometimes when they have their services there, the traffic is unbelievable, and just the way that it's handled throughout the whole neighborhood there, that having another funeral home right at another block away from my shop is a little too much because of the fact that parking from that funeral home, I find them in my parking space. I have 4 parking spaces, and sometimes they're taking up 3 of them. I have to go over to the funeral home and ask them to please remove their cars from there. So it's a little much, and when he says that he wants to help the low-income families of North Miami, are we a low-income place here? I mean, I consider myself that we're the medium levels here and that we're not low-income people, you know, so I don't know where he's saying he's helping low-income people to have a funeral. So my objective is that I don't think that North Miami needs another funeral home. Thank you.
My name is Allison Wiley. I live at 1065 Northeast 134th Street. If this funeral home is allowed, every single day that I leave my house, it's what I will see. When I walk my dog, it's what I'll have to look at. I did not purchase my home. I'm a lifelong Miami resident. I did not purchase my home in North Miami to have to look at a funeral home. It's not that it's separated by a street. I walk out my house and there would be a funeral home. My home value would effectively be rendered to 0. There are 4 funeral homes already on West Dixie Highway, and if he wants to introduce a low-income element to the plot of property right next to my house, that's just ridiculous. It's not a commercial area. There are houses in every direction of it. Next door, across the street, behind it, and I'm sorry, I don't believe that Audio Vision is going to allow his entire funeral home business to be uses overflow parking. I just don't. They don't have enough space for that. So I'm asking you to please exert some very common sense here and do not allow a funeral home to be put across the street from a house, behind a house, so that people can't even play and walk their dogs. I don't want that on my street, and it's just not welcome on my street. Thank you.
Next.
Good evening. My name is Julia Arundel, 1055 Northeast 134th Street. My reason for coming today is, as my neighbor just stated, we are all in that neighborhood against this. And the reason being, and listen to what his comment was, I would like to first state, no one is against business, entrepreneurship. However, when that affects your value, your property value, your way of living, that's when it becomes a part of your interest. What I have seen with many of the funeral homes that landscape on West Dixie Highway is that the overflow of parking, it eventually will end up in front of the residential homes. And to piggyback off of his comment that it is for low income, if it is for low income, I don't know if you mean the community or those you will be servicing for the funeral services, but if you're going to be providing funeral services for those who are low income, that can also inhibit some type of altercations that can occur around our neighborhoods. As I have personally seen at many of these funeral homes, they come in like the parking and the family members, and sometimes there's altercations that occur. And then also if we find parking on our private lots, we have to go outside, we have to ask people to leave, that can cause a fight. This is not things that we really want to start in our neighborhood. 13 parking is not enough, and I believe someone said something to the effect of trying to convey that the staff take the bus. We cannot make people take the bus. If they're gonna drive, that's gonna consume some of the 13 slots for maybe 50, 60 people coming to view bodies in the evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Angel Trucha Lopez, 13325 Northeast 10th Avenue. I think all the points that I want to bring have been discussed, but I want to reinstate them based on my own concerns. In 2005, I moved to North Miami Beach, from North Miami Beach, and this had been my home. I have a very, very serious concern about biohazards. That's number one that comes with that industry. The parking and traffic issues, I hate when I see people putting those concrete cones in front of their properties, but it will have to come to that point, and I hate that, real estate value. We are talking about decrease in real estate, and especially if they're targeting this type of audience that it was mentioned, I totally disagree. We really want to see North Miami as the funeral home strip, like La Vegas of funeral homes? No. The recording studio, there's times that I've seen that their parking has overflowed and they actually park on our streets. So let's say you have a funeral and they have an event on the recording studio, what's gonna happen? And I've seen, for example, that some of these places also have secondary uses, like for churches and services. I love churches, I belong to one, but then that's also added services that may not be under the rules. Number one, and number two, again, circles back to traffic. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Good evening, my name is Hiram Rosas, 1484 Northeast 133rd Road. Many of the great points were made by many of the neighbors of our community, and I believe I moved into Miami, North Miami, from 2009 from actually for the beach. And one of the reasons why I moved in was the regeneration that our neighborhood was going through in regards to the arts. And as many of them have stated, not only is it parking, but the idea of image of what we have. We are duly serviced by many of the funeral homes that are already within our neighborhood. Do we really need another? For the economic impact that maybe 6 people might actually work for this organization, we can actually look for another form of business that might actually best suit not only the neighborhood that's happening, but also the image that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else? Okay, public hearing is closed. Oh. No, that's the applicant.
They would be allowed rebuttal.
Yeah. Well, I still need to close public hearing.
No, that would still be part of the public
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
hearing. Go ahead.
Okay,
I understand all the concerns that the residents have had.
Your name?
My name's, oh, sorry, my name's Anel Simons.
Address.
I'm sorry.
Address.
Anel Simons, 13455, sorry guys, 13455 West Dixie Highway.
And your relationship to the project?
I am the office manager. Okay, I understand some of the concerns, actually all the concerns that they may have. But initially, when we decided to choose North Miami, we chose it because of the advantages to opening up a business, the encouragement of opening up a business. Now, as far as parking, there are different things that we can do. I mean, we can, I know one of the things that the staff has mentioned is maybe we can reconfigure it to have a little bit more. As far as the building across the street from us, it's actually, which is the apartment building that holds the 36 units, it's actually barricaded from us. It's not barricaded, but it's off from us. We have a street that separates us. If the truth be told, they're always parking in our spot, and I could probably take pictures every day of the week on that. But nevertheless, we don't tow anyone, we don't have a problem, you know, we work as a community. If we're not using it, we'll work with them. As far as property value, I'm also a realtor, and that property value in that area has not gone down. There are currently 4 or 5 other funeral homes there. Property value has not gone down. I'm not sure, you know, why that's concerned. If parking, okay, we're getting there, we're finding ways to fix that. I spoke to the gentleman across the street, the music producer. His parking lot is vacant most days. You can drive by and see. Just like, don't take my word for it, most days. And he has graciously offered to take us in. We even spoke to the people across the street, Bank of America, the young lady there. The only thing is they're corporate, so, you know, they could do it, you know, give us anything, but we would be courteous to how people feel. We're not there gonna be parking on grass, because first of all, there's fines for that, but we're not gonna be parking on grass. We've already had a funeral home. We have a funeral home, we've already had one. We know how to work the logistics of it, you know, to make it work for everyone. Looking at a funeral home building will not drop your property value unless you have a phobia, which I often see when, you know, people come in there, they're like, oh, I don't wanna see it, but they wanna, you know, just handle their funeral service, but they don't like to deal with people who die, but that's the circle of life, you know. So I don't see where, you know, we would be a negative aspect to the community. I think we would bring more to the community. Yes, there are other funeral homes there, and no, the property values have not gone down. That's all I have to say about that.
Thank you. Mr. Attorney?
Yes, ma'am. So one of the things that's important for this board to consider is it has to make its decision based upon competent substantial evidence. And there are certain things that citizens can testify to, and there are certain things that they cannot. For example, I would suggest to you that property value is not one of the things that is competent testimony from a citizen. There would have to be some level of expertise to provide that. Whether there are a lot of funeral homes in the area, that may be something you can consider from a citizen. I'm sure observing parking or concerns about parking may also be one of those legitimate concerns. I don't think biohazard would be one of them unless the person testifying was particularly qualified to comment on the use of chemicals at a funeral home. Yes.
As in that regard, they have to go to Durham to get approval for, and how they handle biohazards and how they handle the chemicals. So it's not that they have very specific standards they have to meet through Durham.
Right, and so I'm not advocating for any particular position, but I just wanted you to be aware that there are some statements that you can accept and some statements that you should not be accepting.
Okay, before I get to the board question, I'll go ahead and close public hearing. I do have a question, because that was something that I was concerned about. I know that there is an ordinance that certain businesses that the council took or put into place that they voted upon, such as the number of barbershop, the number of hairdresser, the number of 99-cent stores, and all of that. Does the funeral home fall under that category because of the numbers that they have within the West Dixie Highway?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Board discussion.
Yeah,
Mr. McDermott?
thank you, Madam Chairman. First off, if anybody doesn't realize, this particular property is right on the corner of one of our major traffic intersections in North Miami. It's right on the intersection of 135th Street and West Dixie Highway, which is constantly suffering from traffic congestions. Now, I don't know what this is just one point, I don't know what their volume is going to be, but I know pulling out, having funerals lock up West Dixie Highway and 135th Street on occasion is not a good thing. Secondly, I know the place very well. I knew the gentleman that used to own the place. Judging by what they're saying, half their existing parking places are being used by employees. And I know that area because I live right around the corner. That studio is constantly filled. The parking lot is constantly filled. And when they have entertainment sessions there, they're parking in that particular lot next door because they don't have enough room. So they may have a cross parking agreement with the studio next door, but I don't know really in reality how viable that really is. And I know they have a 3,200 square foot building. That's about the size of a medium-sized home.
It's a big home.
You know? I mean, that's a ridiculous size to try and have a funeral home in. And if you go by it, you'll realize just driving into the parking lot, when it was a dry cleaner, they didn't have enough parking spaces. So if they don't have enough parking spaces where people who drive in and drive out, I mean, the parking is totally insufficient for the volume. I go up and down West Dixie Highway all the time. And I'm telling you, when they have funerals, and most of them have funerals on a regular basis, particularly over the weekend, you can't get near the places. I mean, you just can't get near the places. I mean, the parking is just so totally inadequate. The building size is inadequate, the parking is inadequate, and it's just going to cause a tremendous amount of unnecessary congestion, I think.
And if I may, Madam Chair?
Yes,
I think I do need to step in here. A traffic engineering trip generation study was performed that was verified by our consultant. ITE Trip Generation looked at the trips and the impact on the roadway because the way our code reads, let's separate parking from trip generation. The trip generation is not going, because you can't, the way that they do funeral homes in trip generation analyses is very specific to that particular kind of use. So their consultant conducted it pursuant to the IT Trip Generation Manual. Our consultant reviewed it and determined it was going to have a de minimis impact upon the road. The fact that what the code says as to the requirement of our LDRs, they exceed the parking requirements based upon our LDRs. I want you to remember that. Our code says they only need 6 parking spaces.
Which is ridiculous.
I cannot disagree with that. But when we looked at codes elsewhere, this is a challenge to do parking analyses for funeral homes because they're not a constant. Funeral homes and wakes are not a constant. It's not like you can say, okay, for every, you know that this is going to happen all the time. You don't really know that. However, places like Miami and Miami Beach, they look at things, they have it per whatever the square footage is. In this case, ours governs on the square footage of the space provided in that chapel. You can see that it's a fairly small chapel.
Oh, so you considered it just based on the chapel?
That's what our code requires because it doesn't look at employees, it just looks at the chapel space. So when you're thinking about whether or not it has adequate parking. I can't disagree that our code may not be the best, but it's a challenge when you do parking ratios for uses like that.
But didn't you s-
However,
but didn't
meeting,
you- But didn't you say, Debbie, yourself, that as far as the parking study goes, that the parking people themselves said it was hard to judge because of the nature of a funeral home?
it is, however, there are formulas that they use through the IT trip generation manual that helps to determine adequate parking, because they go out and they look at different funeral homes in the area and calculate based upon the trip generations that occur. Again, our code is very specific. And so if they meet our criteria of our code, staff also had concerns about what was gonna happen with the excess parking, especially as we said in their staff report. During wakes, during funerals, where are they going to park? Because we know that those 13 spaces will not accommodate that. And the fact is that part of your approval, so you decide to do this, is that they can't park in the street. They can't park in the swells.
But they will anyway.
And that's where our code officers are coming into play. One of the things that we're doing now throughout the city is they're actually doing code sweeps, and looking at people parking where they're not supposed to be parking.
And I hear that, and I know we voted on that funeral home, and it doesn't matter. I mean, each case is viewed separately.
True.
But what they proposed to us then is not what's happening. And I always said, who follows up? Because if we have no one following up, and most of these occur during the evening when our code enforcers are not working, resident complain, but, there's nothing that's happening. Now, one of the things I did not see in the application, you said the chapels. I'm not sure how many chapels, how many viewing rooms. I didn't see it.
It's in the
Did
site
I
plan.
skip it?
Yes, ma'am.